Yesterday the House passed the final batch of 2026 spending bills, totaling about $1.2 trillion for the Departments of Defense, Health and Human Services, and other related agencies. These bills will now move to the Senate with final passage needed before a January 30th deadline to avoid another government shutdown. 3 of those bills had bipartisan support, but a fourth that funds the Department of Homeland Security was fiercely disputed as Democrats raised concerns it failed to restrain President Trump's mass deportation efforts. Joining us now, Democratic Congressman Josh Gottheimer of New Jersey and Republican Congressman Mike Lawler of New York. Both serve on the Bipartisan Problem Solvers Caucus, and in the bipartisan spirit, they have appeared with us together. Our thanks to you both this morning. Congressman Gottheimer, I'll start with you. Let's right there, that very contentious vote yesterday about funding for the Department of Homeland Security, namely ICE. Give us your thoughts as to why it went down the way it did.
Well, first, thanks for having us. And let's look at the big headline, which is we actually got a good bipartisan appropriations package done, working together, which will do a lot of great things like lower healthcare costs and pay raise for the military, resources for highway and air traffic controllers and law enforcement. A great bipartisan effort. And, these days, not easy to get that. And so Mike and I and others really work together to make that happen. And let's get the Senate to do it now and make sure the government doesn't shut down. Obviously a difference on this one particular bill. I've got a real problem with the fact that there wasn't any accountability measures at all, despite asking for it for ICE. I believe in making sure we have tough borders, but you just can't go rounding up innocent citizens of the United States, including 5-year-old kids, and without any coordination, zero coordination with local law enforcement and with states. So that just can't go on the way it is. And this was our chance to actually put in strong transparency and accountability measures, and they didn't go for it. But that's an area where we disagree. But again, I think the headline should be where we worked together and got something big done.
Congressman Lawler, I'll take the same point to you, to your colleagues, what he just raised, the idea of accountability. So let me ask you, the scenes that we've all seen out of Minneapolis in recent weeks, the fatal shooting, yes, but also the older man who was pulled out of his home half naked, the scenes of children being detained and the like. The vice president even said yesterday he thought that, he acknowledged that perhaps not everything has gone exactly as it should. Are you comfortable with what you're seeing? Do you think more accountability should be had?
So thanks for having us. Number one, to Josh's point, this is the first time in 29 years that 12 appropriations bills have been passed in the manner in which we have. Normally it's passed as one big omnibus thrown all together, and this was a positive step forward for the appropriations process to really fund the government and start addressing some of the problems within. So I really want to thank Chairman Cole and Ranking Member DeLauro in the House for working together to get this done with the Appropriations Committee. As far as Homeland Security bills, 7 Democrats joined the Republicans in passing it. There was bipartisan support for it. Obviously, I understand, the political climate that we're in right now. I would say a few things. Number one, when it comes to local law enforcement, part of the problem is that in states like New York, in states like Minnesota, where there are sanctuary policies, local law enforcement is prohibited from cooperating with ICE. And we want that to change. I think a lot of these issues that are being raised could be addressed if states and politicians in those states would allow local law enforcement to do their jobs and cooperate with immigration officials to enforce federal immigration law. So that has been part of the challenge and why you see a flood of ICE agents coming into states like Minnesota that are not cooperating. So that's something that should change. I don't think there's any question that there are incidents that occur that, we want to change that. We don't want families being torn apart. I've said this repeatedly. It's a reason why I'm a co-lead on the Dignity Act. We need massive immigration reform in this country to address the broken system. But you have to remember, we had over 10 million migrants flood into this country, into communities all across the nation, including in New York, where, Eric Adams was saying it was crushing the city. It was crippling the city's ability to deliver services. You have 675,000 people that were deported last year. Over 70% of them have a criminal record or criminal charges pending. That is massive. And so when you have states like New York or Minnesota that are refusing to cooperate, and you have murderers, you have child rapists, you have people committing sodomy and rape on the streets, and they're refusing to detain these folks, what is it that you would like ICE to do? Do nothing? Leave them on the streets? That's the fundamental challenge that we're dealing with.
Well, certainly, though, there are many people who are being detained who have been not accused of any violent crimes, not accused of any crime at all.
But they have previous orders of detention against them. And that's part of the challenge here. If you've adjudicated the court process and you have an order of deportation against you and you refuse to leave and local officials refuse to cooperate, again, this is the challenge we're dealing with. I don't want to see incidents occur. We certainly don't want to see anyone killed. But I think also there's got to be greater cooperation at the local and state level so that we can avoid some of these instances.
Well, you mentioned New York City Mayor Eric Adams. He, of course, took a deal from the Trump Justice Department in order to prosecute their immigration policies. Congressman Gottheimer, I hear you. You feel free to jump in.
No, I just want to say one thing. Obviously, if you're a gang member, a terrorist, a criminal, you shouldn't be here. And Mike and I have supported lots of legislation making that very clear. I think the big issue is, and why lots of Americans are concerned, including here in Jersey, and I'm sure Mike's got the same issue in New York, is that they're rounding up innocent people and asking questions after when you're pulling somebody out of their home who is an American citizen, and then after they're in the car and handcuffed, asking them questions like this. And I'm sure you saw in Maine, they arrested this corrections officer. And the local sheriff there, law enforcement, said, "Wait, what's going on here? This is nuts. You can't just do that. This is somebody on my team who's got no issues." So I think it's not wrong, and Mike's right to say, "Hey, listen, if you're a bad guy, you shouldn't be here, and we should and there should be strong cooperation between local and federal to make sure that doesn't happen." The issue is, how do we get better training? You're putting people on lots of ICE officers who aren't well trained. They're not taking the steps that law enforcement would take to make sure you're getting the right person, and they're asking questions later, not in the beginning. And that's the problem. And I think that's the issue we have to address. But again, to Mike's other point, yesterday, and we should not, it's hard to get these big bipartisan wins where we did the right thing. We didn't shut the government down. Now the Senate has to do its job, but we got very big wins for the country yesterday, whether it's for service members, for highway dollars. Again, Mike and I have gone after the New York City's outrageous congestion tax. There was good stuff in there yesterday on that, holding mass transit accountable in certain cities where they're not spending money wisely. Like there are big things for people yesterday that are going to get healthcare costs down for the country. Those are all great things for people, and we got to focus on, and Mike and I continue to focus on where we can get the things done together to help people and make life more affordable for them.
Polling does suggest congestion pricing popular in New York City. But you're right, Congressman Gottheimer. Both of you have said
not in Jersey.
Bipartisanship, perhaps rare, but should be applauded when it happens. So certainly kudos there. But on an agreement, another matter where there was bipartisanship, nearly unanimous, Congressman Gottheimer, was the release of the Epstein files. Now more than a month overdue, required by law to be released. Still no sign of it. DOJ continuing to not release them. What other things could Congress do, perhaps in a bipartisan manner, to force the issue?
Well, I think putting a ton of pressure on to actually remind the Justice Department that we passed legislation that was signed into law by this president to release the records. I think this is one of these things where you have to hold the administration accountable and remind people every single day that we got to get these documents produced. And like, to me, that it's pretty simple. And I think the public pressure, and by the way, pressure from Democrats and Republicans on this has been consistent, right? You've seen both parties say, release the files.
And Congressman Lawler, lastly, you sit on the House Committee on Foreign Affairs. So we wanted to get your thoughts on what we've seen the last few days. In terms of Greenland, the President of the United States demanded that the U.S. be given Greenland. That has not happened. He has since cut some sort of deal, specifics vague at this point. But it doesn't seem like the arrangement has changed all that much. But one thing that is clear is Europe, they said so themselves, the leaders of in many European states, really frustrated by this process and feel like, in their words, that they can't trust the United States like they used to. So let me ask you, do you think this was worth it?
So just real quick on the Epstein points, the file should be released. The Department of Justice should expeditiously do that. I will say, I think the way the bill was written, giving 30 days for them to review all of these files was probably a little too short of a window, given you're talking about millions of records, to make sure that victims' information, et cetera, is not released. But they should expeditiously get that information out. And if they don't, Congress should move to act. As far as Greenland goes, I've said repeatedly that military force should be off the table. I was glad that the president made that clear the other day in his speech at Davos. It never should have been a question. The issue of greater U.S. military presence on Greenland for the purpose of shared defense with NATO and in the Arctic region, as well as the potential for a minerals deal, I think is smart, and I certainly support that. And I think you saw, a little bit of relief. I hear you on some of the frustration, but I think NATO recognizes the importance of a strong U.S. military presence and U.S. military's support for their defenses in Europe. And when you look at just what happened a few weeks ago, where you had an oil tanker come from Iran, go to Venezuela, and on its way to Russia, get seized off the coast of Iceland. The fact is, Russia uses the Arctic region as its little backyard. And we need to aggressively push back against Russia's malign influence in the region. And I think the president is right to focus in on how Greenland can play an important role on that. My view was this was always going to be a negotiation. And the end result is you're going to get some level of increased U.S. military presence and a minerals deal. And that's a positive step forward. But the fact is, military force to seize Greenland should never be on the table. And there is broad bipartisan opposition to that.
And that's an area where Mike and I definitely agree strongly on that. And I think on the Intelligence Committee, let me just tell you, that area that Mike is talking about, we have got to do everything we can to work cooperatively, to be vigilant, working closely with our NATO allies, not adversely with them, but actually cooperatively. And I think hopefully that's where we end up here, having what we need in Greenland and the region from a national security perspective, and of course making sure we maintain those alliances which are critically important. I think, again, you're finding good agreement here with me and Mike, another good bipartisan win here.
Both sides of the aisle don't invade Greenland. Democratic Congressman Josh Gottheimer of New Jersey and Republican Congressman Mike Lawler of New York are thanks to
today. Mike and I are both feeling taller today.
There we go. All right. Thank you both. We appreciate you being with us.